Near the end of February, I graduated college, then rented a small U-Haul, loaded a few things, and drove my motorcycle up the ramp into it, which was really what I needed it for. I wasn't likely that I'd ever reside in Oak Park again. I was still in a depression called mourning. I'd have to fake being alive on my new job, and to myself too, in order to get a good start there at IBM, for perhaps that would save my life somehow. New state, family far away, Lucille dead, depression, no friends, the stress of beginning a high-level job, had to find an apartment, the army breathing down my neck. No matter. I was an adventurer. I could survive even at half speed for a while. Her love would give me life, bring on the world even unto the valley of the shadow of death in some unfriendly foreign land. I am become life, creator of worlds. I was assigned to share an office in the 705 building with Mike. He was already staffed to the second-level manager, Frank Hackle. Mike had liked my college grades and courses, and so had made room for me in his office. 4.5 years of study had gotten me a good seat. Mike was a go-getter and would do well in management, but at the moment he was saddled with updating a microcode simulator written in assembler language, among other duties that were an extension of Frank's management. However, programming wasn't Mike's thing. I soon found out why. Mike left a note on my desk one day, asking me to write a MOM instead of memo on the features to be added to the simulator. He'd also had trouble telling a load from a load address instruction, as the first loads the contents of an address into a register, and the second loads the address of the contents into a register. So, he had dyslexia. I'll update the simulator, test it, and write up the features, and even put out a user guide.
Great, I hate programming. I'm better with ideas at large.
And so then you can deal with the users and the meetings and the publicity and all that higher-level management type stuff that is your destiny.
Hey, I like that. I'm trying to get into that and more.
As a first-line manager?
No, too low too for my grand plan. They don't set direction.
Waiting for Frank to leave?
Yeah, he's grouchy, and that's not going to work around here. Maybe they'll send him to manufacturing.
I heard they run it like the army down there.
Yeah, they do, and that will suit Frank and IBM just fine. Around there, we have to treat people like the professionals that they are.
Mike, one day you will be the head of the corporation. And he did so as lab director and head of IBM US, and then as the head of IBM Japan.
I just had a meeting with the chairman of IBM.
You just made an appointment with him, simple as that?
Yeah, I went over everyone's head and I made it at 4 p.m. hoping that it would continue after hours, which it did, and so we had dinner together.
And?
Okay, I feel like I can trust you, Pat. I laid out a grand vision for the future and the chairman bought it.
Wow, and here I am at the start of it.
I need your software expertise. I didn't go to college. I started here 4 years ago in manufacturing and then moved up here. I'm the last of that breed. From now on, college degrees are needed for one to work in the lab here.
Is this going to be some sort of coup or something?
Yeah, kind of, for they're all content here just to sit on the initial profits. And if so, other companies will steal our market. RCA, for example, has a good machine.
It sounds like a grand adventure. You can count on me.
I already am.
At IBM in 1969, with a young Irish man named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty, I took on some more programming jobs, turning crap into gold. They were impressed. Were there great minds at IBM? Well, yes and no, with the logical reasoning types being the yes and the feeling, emotional types being the no. There was also a dearth of females, and yet, for all the lack of them, the males didn't even seem interested. The place was a kind of a nerd world. Many would stay and work late, even those who were married. I bought a car, a new rare four-door 1970 Ford Maverick, deep blue with a black vinyl roof. We started going out to lunch a few times a week, and then dinner. I told her stories. She was so easy to talk to, and she loved that I was a poet. Or did my nature pave the road of love, or was she the one looking? We became closer, and so her saga eventually unfolded. For it is then that secrets get revealed, which in turn cement the friendship even further. Not bad for $2,000. I was coming out of my depression. I wasn't totally myself again yet, but I was well enough to attract the attention of Patty Hernandez, a Colombian beauty. She had a nice apartment at Cal Rock Manor right on the Hudson River. She had made dinner for me. This was getting serious. Dessert made it for sure. The next day, during lunchtime, we went walking on the river cliffs behind IBM, very high above the Hudson River, where there were no trespassing signs, for I guess someone might fall off and sue the company. The water sparkled. The day was perfect. A miracle had descended on me.
Patrick, I'm torn. I love us, but I'm supposed to get engaged to someone who I don't know, although we've met. Our families have arranged this back in Colombia, and I'd been stalling. Then I got a job here a year ago, thank God. But I think I have to go through with it, just to show I tried, to respect the old folks.
So if it works, you're fine, and if it doesn't,
then I can eventually get out of it, but I may have some bit of unknowns in between.
And yet you are so alive, so powerful, so happy, and so joyous that it wouldn't really get you down, would it, if that's how it went? Your smiles say it all.
True, I'm fairly invincible.
So what can I do for you?
Keep on being my friend and lover and going out with me no matter what.
Well, you're all I could ask for and more, but I may get drafted this year, plus you should really give your marriage a chance if it comes to that. Sometimes people grow to love each other in those situations.
Well, for now, you and I fine, so let's not worry about it until we have to. However, I called him yesterday.
And?
He feels the pressure too, but he doesn't want to get married. He's not interested. Says he would run off. He just wants to keep on doing whatever it is that he does in Colombia. I didn't want to know what he does, and he didn't bring it up.
We'll take it as it goes.
Thanks, Patrick.
My office mate, Mike Monachino, who was married, still got all worked up over seeing Patty, for she'd stopped by my office to ask me to go on a coffee break with her or to lunch. I did tell him how it began a few days later, for he was dying to know, after she'd come over for another coffee break. Well, Mike, when I first got here, I walked around a bit to a different area each day to get a feel for what people were working on and to see if they need software support, most of which you know about. I ran into the error domain analysis area in which they had to find out what parts had to be replaced when an error checker came on.
Yeah, we're on the cusp of the big time. Soon there will be trillions of circuits. So you automated it? I just heard today that they're going great all of the sudden. Their manager didn't even know why yet.
Yeah, I'd been putting it together in my spare time. They just began using it. So far I have something much more than just rudimentary, which is working out well so far.
You got through cables into the rest of the system?
Yeah, I got the cable person to make and maintain a cable database. It's only approximate now. It needs some more work. However, cables don't change all that much compared to the modules.
Wow, but they always thought that we didn't have the computing power to trace all the circuits back.
We don't in real time through all of them, and no one does, to trace it all at once, through all the internal circuits, which need not be done each time, since we only need to know where the traces stop. So I first carved the system into what I call segments.
And so now we have a better field replaceable unit strategy, and we don't end up wasting money by replacing working FIUs or everything, when replacing what we guessed at didn't work. Those things cost $50,000 a piece.
Yeah, and so we get it right the first time.
You're going places too, Pat. They had some people in another building trying to trace everything all at once, but all they could do was trace through about half a module, which ran for days, usually getting halted when the machine went down or bursted its capacity.
It's not logically possible to even get through a module, much less the whole system, though our machines are pipsqueaks, yet we save up the segment traces. We don't lose everything if the machine goes down.
Yeah, the computer age has just begun, and I can see where it's headed. Everyone's going to want more power.
The error domain analysis group is on the verge of coming over to ask you if they can borrow me to soup up the program some more, condensing the output more, and even blue sky, like letting them point a pen on a screen to control the traceback, instead of having to type in a name. although that's easy enough, since they only have to do it once.
I'll think about the pen part. Sometimes you end up putting a lot of time in on what turns out to be a diminishing return. We'll be lucky to even get some terminals this year, much less pen technology like the CAD machines have, plus they are all in use. But yeah, make the improvement on the output.
True. And I at least need someone to do some of the busy work, but it's straightforward. We need to keep up with the engineering changes to the modules so we can rebuild the segments right away.
Sounds reasonable. It's all great, actually. Thanks. I hadn't expected so much so soon.
I got lucky.
No, you made it happen. I'll get you someone to run the logic data segments whenever something gets updated.
Right time, right place. One thing led to another.
I didn't hear anything about Patty in all this.
Oh yeah, she's responsible for the I/O processor error domains.
Yeah, that processor is different from the rest, to the degree that it doesn't have the data support the others get, although it is smaller. They thought they didn't need it.
Now it's bigger, so we had to do more work in her area. So she kept calling me over. We built some of the data by hand.
And when that was done?
She still kept calling me over.
Aha, I see.
At IBM in 1969, with a young Irishman named Patrick with reddish-brown hair and Patrick's boss named Mike, a thin young Italian man and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. Yeah, Mike, about Patty, it all just snuck up on me, just like that, sort of.
You couldn't help but be charming, though.
Have to keep the customers happy.
When did you suspect romance?
When she began sitting closer and closer to me.
I'll be darned. You go off and do great work, and then out of nowhere she falls into your lap.
That's how it was. I wasn't trying anything, me being new and all that. One thing leads to another.
Don't say that you were lucky.
How come?
One often makes their own luck.
As you are.
Yeah, I'm really into this business. My home life is what it is.
How is it?
I'm not sure I should have married my wife.
How come?
It felt kind of rushed by my attending too much to my work ambitions.
Sometimes we can have the one thing we really want, but not all the things.
Yeah, it would have been better to start with love, and then the other thing more easily come along for the ride.
What else about your wife?
She has depression, which she always had, but sometimes she has a lot of energy, which is great.
Manic depressive.
Yeah, I felt compelled to help her, and I thought marriage would assist that. I didn't feel like I should look for someone else, for then her depression might worsen. We just all of the sudden decided to marry and get settled in.
Unconditional love.
Yeah, plus I didn't want to have to look all around through the scarce resources. I fully resigned myself to her, for better or for worse.
Depression is hard to deal with. Thoughts don't come. The mind goes blank. I sort of had it once.
Sometimes, Pat, one's role in life ends up to be to take care of someone less fortunate, and so that is mine.
Yeah, I'm seeing that with Patty. She's totally modern but has ties to the old world in South America that are tugging on her. She was dying to freely live and love, and there I was.
She's always upbeat, fantastic personality. Perhaps she'd been waiting for the right person.
Yeah, probably. That's one of the things I like about her. She rises above all pettiness and politics. Just lets them sail right on by. I read her some poems on our first outing, and she liked them.
She's a good engineer.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that she didn't have to be beautiful for that.
She's dedicated.
Yeah. I'm taking her to a special place for lunch today. Mariner's Harbor, right on the river, just across it and almost under the bridge. It just opened for the season.
Take some extra time, it's a beautiful day. And you two have a drink on me and then wait there until it wears off. Here's $10. If anyone comes around looking for you or her, I'll say you're in a meeting not to be disturbed until 2 p.m. or so.
By your command. And it's true that we'll be in a meeting.
Live it up. You're free.
I know how depression feels.
What happened?
My girlfriend back in Illinois died in a fire. We'd been together 4 years.
I'm so sorry. Does one ever get over something like that?
No, I'll be under it. until some more time passes. I make the good times bright in my mind.
You didn't show any signs of depression.
I couldn't afford to, but it's passing.
From work, this new place, and Patty?
Yeah,
You have great strength. Can't imagine what you might do on full speed.
thanks, Mike.
What about Donna over there?
IBM had her pose for a photo with the new machine to be announced. Sometimes she goes to lunch with us. She's a good friend. She's married, but she doesn't talk about it.
How about that? She's an IBM model. And I saw her husband out carousing in a bar where I was drowning my sorrows the other day.
Sometimes Raven Diddy goes out to lunch with me, Patty, and Donna,
He's an upstanding guy.
which means he has an eye on Donna for the future, but is being careful of the situation.
Tough spot. Not too many women at IBM.
Yeah, and a lot of the single men couldn't care less, for they're really into their work. Some even have a mattress in their office behind the door.
They're going to ruin this place. We can't have standalone people being the only experts on just one thing. What if they leave or get sick?
I overhear some of the married men getting calls from their wives to come home for dinner.
Or to cut the grass. They come in on the weekends too.
They probably say to their wives, "Honey, I'm going out to have an affair." And their wives say, "You can't fool me. You're going to the lab again, aren't you?"
Good one. Have a wonderful lunch. I hear heels coming way down the hall.
We'll be pretending we're in Tahiti there.
I'll be here, getting ready for a big meeting later.
That's how it is when you're moving up fast.
Yeah, stuck to my ambition.
Mike, I think IBM wants you to take over Frank's spot soon, jumping you right into second level where decisions really get made, bypassing the mundaneness of being a first level manager.
How did you get wind of that?
The secretary did.
Thanks. I'll act surprised at the big meeting later. Then I'll present my plan. I'd better get working on touching it up.
You're on your way into higher management.
What about you?
Nah, someone has to do the work.
True. IBM needs both kinds, especially when they understand each other. Hey, we can use your traceback software to help us make validation tests. We're calling them VTs. I'm putting those other traceback people on it to develop the test patterns.
It will already work. We just have to set a parameter to have it trace back one cycle, which means always ending up at latches. Simple. We can keep those new kind of traces around separately.
Hey, great, and I've just hired an African graduate girl to help you keep all the module segments current. Lots of design changes are coming. Her name is Mary. We're supposed to have more diversity here. IBM's orders. I had a hand in it.
She's starting soon.
Next week, we're moving the Indian guy out of your office and her in.
We also need a correspondence data set, Mike, call it a CDS, to relate facility names to net names to give us more readability. We can keep it in scan ring order, and so then the VT guys can save the scan rings, put in the patterns they want to test with, and then restore the scan rings. Other groups can use the CDS too.
I'll expand them to a full department. Congratulations.
I did something?
You're on staff to me now. You get a pay raise in your own office. Good work. Mary's doing well?
She's doing great.
She'll be next door to you. And I'm putting you in charge of hiring interns and summer workers because you always talk to people as people. Hire from the ethnic outgroups more, but mainline too, and hire more women than men. We have some catching up to do. I have a list and their college grades and their resumes. Hire about 20. Check with the first line managers to see what they need. We're going to be building way bigger and better machines in the years to come, and many of these workers can get hired permanently then. Hire half for hardware, half for software. After they accept, have them call the personal department, which we now call human resources. This is the reverse of normal, but we can't wait to go through HR first, or out to colleges to interview and all that jazz. Besides, it's summer. Time to speed up the old IBM turtle. Have Sudai double-check the logic design prospects. Give the software guys the basics. Do we have such a library?
I made one in college. Coding errors happen more at the lower levels, which we can minimize through functions and more functions.
What a revelation. You're making my life easy.
At IBM in 1969, with a young Irish man named Patrick with reddish-brown hair and Patrick's boss named Mike, a thin young Italian man and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. "Hey Mike," I said as I walked into his office a week later. "Everyone's been hired and have been here for a week. Where have you been?"
They sent me to a useless manager training school. And yeah, I noted some new faces. No one told me anything while I was away.
They're like a new United Nations.
That will shake the place up.
The first-line managers have given them something to do.
Great.
The only problem is that they are all coming over in their spare time and gluing themselves onto me as some kind of big brother or best friend. I can tell that it's going to become difficult for me to get my work done.
The ladies too?
Especially them.
Don't be tough on them. It wouldn't suit you anyway. They like that you got them a job. Entertain them for a while more in the mornings. Work is supposed to be fun too.
And then I'll hide out somewhere?
Yeah, bring your work to the River restaurant. We don't have the damn terminals yet.
Really? And really?
Yeah, it will be peaceful there after you have lunch. Bring Patty sometimes. And I just put out $1 million to speed up the terminal work. We lead the company in revenue so we can spend. Our big fat executives just above me wouldn't spring for it out of their pocket. The chairman is keeping some of this to himself for now, so the executives don't feel insulted. They would have been slow to ride the wave. They like the status quo. The recession will begin to end, and then they'll begin to come around.
They'll get neither the glory nor suffer any downfalls.
Yeah, too safe. I'm willing to take both of the chances. There's all kinds of businesses out there who haven't even heard of computers yet. I've steered the sales force to them, for what else do they have to do on their way back from the big calls who are already in our fold?
All this will take time.
2 years to make a new and better machine.
You can cut it to 1 on average later.
I'm ahead on this one. I didn't tell the secretary. I'm gearing up to have people designing the future system at the same time the current system is being worked on. Then their roles will switch and so forth. They'll be in part of the 707 building. Yeah, and we're making it larger.
Right place, right time, Mike.
Yeah, it's going to be a heyday. So, what you hear from the selective service, we're losing people like crazy.
Nothing yet, but based on the draft rate, I'd say I have up to January 1970.
Good. Lots of time left to get things rolling. And maybe they'll make peace, not war.
They're not even close to talking about any peace accords. North Vietnam wants the whole country.
You worry about it?
No, I let Nixon do it.
He's being suspected of doing secret things behind the scenes, without the approval of Congress. Kind of like what I do here. Ha ha.
But you have a much better chance.
That's for sure.
To us. A train crawled across the river bridge, limited to 5 miles an hour on the old structure that was built in 1888, it being the longest of its type then. Another train lumbered by just next to the restaurant. It was a long one. Ducks and seagulls landed near our outside table asking for bread. The waves lapped at the edges of the platform. Boats went by or took off from the docks. The afternoon wore on. We usually had the place to ourselves at this later time, with but a few early dinner eaters drifting in. The river was wide at this point, and the sun shone its brassy glow upon it. I was writing JCL, which means Job Control Language, for the new VT process. Mostly it relates program file names to the right data sets to be connected or generated and passed on to the next step. Patty was designing the new I/O processor. She'd been promoted. It was a good move, for now she could also size up the locations for the error checkers.
We have the river surrounded, Patrick. Day here and night over there.
I sleep well there, Patty.
I'm happy to tire you out.
We'd go straight to her place on these types of days. No use going back to work to read the notes put on my desk, some of them even silly love notes from intern Laura. My cup overfloweth. Well, maybe some would pan out in the future for IBM. Patty put her work aid, got up and slowly danced for me to the soft music that ever played in this place. Her eyes were round and bright, her figure well-formed, her hair jet black, her near Colombian-style dress made such that her cups would tend to runneth over, and they pay me to be here.
I've liked your poetry so much that I've begun to write my own, Patrick. I'll show it to you tonight.
We can read it out on your porch under the full moon.
What got you into poetry, Patrick?
Everything I ever wrote was for or about love,
It's the best subject.
and the best reason for living too.
We're as married now.
It is like that.
It's been 5 months.
And I suspect we'll have about 5 more.
Don't go off and die in some faraway land.
I'll have to go off, but I won't die. It seems that I am invincible. I'm ever within the eye of the hurricane of death.
I'm still so high every day about us. It's even still increasing.
Whatever it is that makes for love, it's the most superb combination that nature ever came to form. Its existence seems hardly even hinted at by its essence.
Why did there have to be a war? Can we be together always, no matter what?
If I know that it's okay all around.
Maybe my life won't come to that. I'm hoping everyone just ends up dropping this arranged marriage thing.
Enough time will do that, maybe. They'll forget about it.
It's a big thing to them. For now, they are very firm about it.
You're here, and they're there.
Yeah, that helps, but they're planning to move here next year.
Yikes, and I'll be gone.
You'll never be gone to me.
2 long years.
Dreadful, yes.
This is the first time I've ever seen you sad.
Our love has swallowed me up, and even now I urge it on, unafraid to plunge into the very depths of it. No holding back, all out.
Quench your whole being in it, for I do, and I'll never let you down. In 1969, at the restaurant on the river, with a young Irish man named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. Remember that day that some people here liked talking with us and took us on their boat and even said that we could use their boat anytime?
Yeah, but we haven't yet.
I know, it's like once you've seen the river up and down, well, you've seen the river.
Yeah,
But it's over there, and they're still away as they said they would be.
make love to you in the boat?
Yeah, let's make waves.
And they pay me for this.
We soon had most of the United Nations workers going out to Mariners Harbor, about twice a week, once for lunch, and for dinner after work, for then we could stay as long as we wanted. Mike came, sometimes too, with his wife, and paid for everyone. There was Chinese Linda, Chinese David, Indian Rachna, American Laura, American Susan, French Lily, Soviet Elena, American Ken, Korean Janice, American Judy, African Mary, and many more. At work, the rosy future was lumbering along in its preparations, but much quicker than a snail's pace, thanks to Mike's lead. Whatever we needed, we just invented on the fly. No regulations stifling us, no underwriters' laboratories poking around. On some weekends, Patty and I went out 20 miles or so to the Shawangunks, a mountain range south of the Catskills that had glacial lakes on the tops, namely a Sty Big Ones, a Wasting, Minnewaska, and Mohonk. We ate at their resorts and went swimming in the lakes. It was a glimpse back into an 18th century way of life. Some of the hotels were called mountain houses. We found a trail that led to the edge of the cliffs after 10 minutes or so, and there we lay, on giant slabs of rocks, looking across and down into the forest from such a height that the trees looked like grass. We called our story there, Living on the Edge, which I wrote down back then. The sweet-scented manuscript of our love relationship is open to a most delicious page, on which we live ideally in an intermediate and perfect honeymoon state, delicately and intentionally balanced so as to forever prolong that magic hour between night and day. We bought a picnic lunch, wine glasses, and after some difficulty, a corkscrew. For some reason, my clothes were out on the hood of the car, and I had to keep reaching out the window to get the next new piece. Patty was amused. The sky was as clear as we were, and we could see right into each other. She started up the gradual rock face that was the beginning of the trail. We followed the blue markers and reached several false summits, sitting and enjoying the view. We could see the Catskills to the northwest and the Wallkill Valley to the east. We followed the trail through the woods for a while and came out to a grassy knoll on the edge of a cliff. The view was breathtaking, and any fall would have been death-taking. Here it was that we decided to live life on the edge in every tempting way. The cliff was triple-tiered, and we selected the second level. We spread our blanket and filled our rose-colored wine glasses. We slowly ate our sandwiches and cheese and spoke to each other in rather hushed voices. Again and again we would look up and out over the never-ending vista. My utter soul was bared and snuggling against hers in an ultimate joining which far transcended the physical. We later laughed and talked about life and love and hopes and dreams and people. The sun was getting warm, so we moved to a shady spot on the lower level of the cliff. As we were romping there, gravity began to draw us down a slight slope. Little by little, I sat up, held onto a tree, and peeked over the edge. Off in the distance, we could see the sky-top tower at Mohonk. In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains, with a young Irish man named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. We next lay face to face on a large rounded rock cushioned by our blanket. We drew close to each other until we could get no closer. I pulled her leg up and over mine, and we began to become one with the rock and with each other, warm, cozy, and secure. I melted against her, dissolved by love. We became one. We were about, around, next to, and within each other. It was a unity, a oneness, a joining of two beings. It was an indescribable closeness in which normal notions of time and space disappear. We were surprised to feel that our bed seemed to be floating through space. I joked to her that she was truly between a rock and a hard place, but it was no joke. Driving back, she sang Broadway songs to me, and I felt like I was really hearing them for the first time. We stopped in a little town for a cold soda. I'm writing this essay in the morning twilight just before dawn because that's the time of day that represents our relationship. It's no longer night, yet it is not day. Twilight is the only time when the night and day can meet each other and kiss. This is the page to which our book is open. This is the time when we can glimpse Camelot and live in an ideal world. We don't fight, we don't argue, we confide in each other, we live in each other, we live in a perpetual sunrise. Sometimes I feel in my descriptions that I'm grasping at shadows and fleeting images that defy being captured into words because they exist only in the soul's wordless realm. However, some haunting apparitions persist in their rising to the surface, still in their formless and mysterious ways which the writer can try to translate. We were drenched in the alluring fragrance of the vapor that permeated on through to our souls. Although we had set out on the trail to walk to Gertrude's nose, we had only made it to Gertrude's little toe. On other days in the Shawangunks, we took long loops, walking the old carriage trails through much mountain laurel and rhododendron. We didn't have anything like this back in Illinois.
Give me a summary of your childhood.
I lived with my parents in my grandparents' house at 1030 Winona Avenue until I was 3 or 4. Learning of the flowers and plants there in the backyard, where there was a little pool and a sandbox, and of the fine swing on the front porch on lazy summer days. The bread wagon would pull up in front while the scary scissors-grinding man would come up the alley. I learned to unhook the back porch door with a broom and go out wandering, where I met Tracy, who was several years older, who always watched over me in the alley. There was an unused Model T in our garage, gathering dust, for Grandpa could no longer see well enough to drive. There was also a library of old books that I began to read in later years. The adventures in the alley ever called to me, and still do, across the decades, where there was also a basketball hoop. We moved to a rented house on Euclid Avenue when I was 4 or 5, across from a park in which I'd take shelter under the wide bushes by myself. From here, I spied on those walking down the sidewalk from work or school. Brother Mike was born, and I stood up in bed on one of his crying nights and told him to please be quiet, but it was more like, shut up, shut. In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains, with a young Irish man named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. High school was 3 miles away, and I'd get up early, have some hard-boiled eggs or cereal, and graham crackers crushed in milk, and walk to the village bus, 6 blocks away. After school, we'd walk all the way home with friends and sweethearts, Joe Gaynor, Pat Hickey, and I, the trio of mirth. I wore a leather jacket and rode a motorcycle, but was a good student, a rare combination. I remember the football games at the stadium on the autumn evenings, the tail-light parking areas, the dances and plays, and all the school note passing, as well as the Beatles coming into vogue. And then I met you, Patty.
Very interesting. You have spared me the details of your romances for now.
There were several great ones.
I'm glad. It's great for me to be with someone who appreciates and understands females. I love it that you had wonderful girlfriends. You can tell me more next time. I love romance and adventure tales.
We're living one.
It's the best of times, and it's the best of times.
Okay, get ready. Better sit down on this boulder. First, some serious stuff. The God believer is but the result of indoctrination, the sources of which may be geographical, sociological, or familial, and I shall move on in a bit to those who utilize introspection and/or felt sensation. Either way, they want it that the zillion galaxies of the universe are all there for their mammal, Homo sapiens cause, which is the beginning of wrong thinking.
Good, Patrick. For the mistake is to posit a being as fundamental, which no being can be.
In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains, with a young Irish man named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. What being?
They want not just any old being, but even an infinitely advanced one. No go. The complex composites form later on and evolve.
I'm preaching to the choir?
Yeah, but I like it.
Nor does the eternal basis of stuff, or even nothing, admit to any creation, as it was forever, so to speak, but more like timeless. However, emotion trumps logic for some, and they will neglect reason or not care, for they want what they want, as their own exaggerated importance in the scheme of things. They don't wish to be humble, material creatures who have even been shown to have evolved from little things over 4 billion years, for where's the glory in that? Pride trumps humility.
Brains do odd things to us sometimes.
Yes, for the wires that fire together then wire all the more together, they then going on to rule the show.
My parents are both holy. They say they feel things.
The right hemisphere of the brain is much more holistic than the left, and may even emit a felt sensation of a presence that is wordless, it being a felt sensation. The right brain itself is felt as a presence. One can even feel the right brain side getting a bit warmer when, say, considering a piece of furniture as a whole instead of when inspecting its details.
All in all, the experiences of presences or gods is but the second story atop the neurological first story. But believers are prone to neglect science, or even bash it to keep their notions safe.
The mythic ages will die out as new generations come along, as already seen in Europe and in the once stable US Northeast.
There is nothing to show for God as expected, and everything to show against. A double whammy, yet emotion from introspection strives on, the blind leading the blind. It's only human to do so. Live and let live, unless they ask.
In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains, next to a lake, with a young Irishman named Patrick with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. Yes, live and let live.
They grasp for unscientific proofs, such as in OBEs, which are but of sleep paralysis and can even be chemically induced, and also by employing terms right and left like spirit or soul, which are just said, having been invented just for the occasion of the God beliefs, and even then proclaiming them as gospel truth, which is surely an overstatement, and further, a deception when stated factually.
We've always had myths, but we didn't always have science. As God vanishes and the world closes in, especially in these uncertain times, there will still be some who wish to appeal to magic as something to hold on to. Yet, magic ever has strings attached. A little more thought beyond the almost automatic stopping point of thinking no further reveals that we are already free to be, there being no need to restrict oneself to the idea of some strict family father figure of ancient times, whom they amazingly even go on to speak for. Alas, myth will not save the world, but will only retard it.
The world is not a safe place. Asteroids, earthquakes, and weather may devastate us and our cities. There is no sure refuge, no hands of God saving us. Extinctions come and go. There were many more near extinctions than the Noachian deluge.
We have advanced via science, not myth. All types of people wish to run their cars, heat their homes, and use appliances. Light shines upon us. The darkest ages are past, but this is no insurance against the same.
Life on this little speck in the cosmos is ever precarious. That it came about at all is both the curse and the blessing. We exist in the middle of nowhere, formed by little or nothing, but in a time of relative ease, for some, and to non-existence we will return, but hopefully living gloriously in the in-between, doing good but for good's sake, the highest ideal.
We're getting serious, but I'll come up with some funny stuff in a while.
That's okay. I can do serious very well. Why do they neglect the paradoxes, Patrick?
Some believers don't wish to deal and respond to the self-contradictedness of the concept of God because then they may have to actually consider it. But their emotions sway them away and back to their suppositional notions, wherein they conceive of invisible beings and talk to them, and even speak for them, concocting more invisible notions such as souls layered on, not caring or even wanting to know that these entities would have to be material in order to talk the talk and walk the walk of the material. However, appeals to magic can take care of that problem.
I've seen it, Patrick. As anywhere they say, huh? Plead ignorance of science? Employ tired old deflections upon the person? Or on emotions as saying the ideas are to inflame and bring hate? It's no wonder, though, for what else do they have? Even more piles of invisibles. After a point that begins to look really silly, and so they just outright neglect the ideas, instead adding made-up words to support their own position, such as soul, angels, immaterial realm, spirit, and other such obvious unshowables, along with the chutzpah to even proclaim them as the truth. It's an invisibility disorder. I only talk about these things with you.
In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains, next to a waterfall, with a young Irishman named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. As long as we've made up without proof that an infinitely advanced being just sat around for most of forever marveling at his non-God-given talent until he decided one day to create the whole entire universe that had in it a special place called Earth, we might as well extend these suppositions to say that this divinity of Emerson's incorporated a kind of soul transponder into our highly evolved mammal brains to animate us, and to perhaps provide some outside help for our chemistry exams in college.
She sighed. Might as well make up more. This immortal, immaterial light body thing of a soul lets us talk to God back and forth, and is also what leaves the body at death to go back where it came from, which is perhaps a heaven in which all wishes can come true, along with great peace and happiness. While on earth, a devil may attempt to retard us, so watch out. What a tall tale.
That's my cue, Patty. So God, who was much older than dirt, in fact, infinitely old, decided to perform some lab experiments one day around 14 billion years ago, or else it was only 4,000, 6,000 years ago supposedly, producing mammal sapiens as his pride and joy. However, he was evidently a poor craftsman, perhaps because he was so old. And so these mammals goofed up left and right, and even up and down and sideways, building and worshipping golden calves and so forth. So he sent Moses, the same Moses who had wiped out so many tribes, to bring the tablets down from the burning bush on the mountain to them. But this didn't have any real effect. So God killed everyone on earth but for Noah and his wife, Yesa. She always had to say yes, as that's how it was in those days. No, she was not really named Yesa, but was Joan of Arc. And then the new mammal's descendants still screwed up in and out, and so God sent some prophets, but this still failed. And so God impregnated a virgin in some magic way, Jesus being the result. Jesus then converted from Judaism to Christianity, but the people crucified him and still acted horrible for nearly 2 millennia, when upon he sent Our Lady of Fatima. But still his creatures were full of evil, and so now the world will come to an end on December 21st, 2024.
She smiled. Now that's funny. Now what about the tallest tale of all?
As evolution never happened, the fossils being planted fakes, it is that God made Adam and all in immutable forms, as is, and separately about 4,096 years ago, seeing that Adam was good, although not that great, placing him in the mother of all gardens, Eden, where the lion and the lamb lay down together, this never producing any lamb chops. Adam was lonely, being the first and only mammal sapiens, plus not even having any childhood memories. For a child he never was, nor even a teenager. In fact, X-rays of his brain showed nothing. God, too, had no earliest memory, he having been around forever. So he felt sorry for Adam and asked Adam if he would like a perfect and very attractive kind of opposite partner with whom he could have love and companionship. Adam said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go for that perfect creature." God replied, "But she will cost you an arm and a leg." Adam, rather liking his arm and leg, said, What can I get for just a rib, as I can surely spare one of those? Well then, God answered, missing the humor of the spare rib, how about a less than perfect one, but still a very good partner? Okay. God made Eve right there on the spot, while also adding some lust into Adam and her, although greatly overdoing it. Well, Adam glowed with excitement over this beautiful naked lady, as if he'd never seen one before, which he hadn't, saying, "Holy hot tomato, whoa man, this is fantastic, I'll take her, what a great date." "Okay, she's yours," God said, "and we'll call her woman, as you said, no trade-ins allowed, but she won't cut the grass, take out the trash, or paint ceilings." So what, for I don't even know what those are, or care. "And don't touch the apple from Newton's tree, thou shalt not, this is firm." Okay, what the heck would I want to touch that for when I have Eve? True, Adam. And before you get married, she will say that she wants only one thing, you, but after that, then she will say she wants everything. Hey, no sweat, for everything is right here in this garden.
They immediately married and lived happily together for a few minutes, he harvesting her pomegranates and more, as told in The Song of Solomon, and she enjoying his evergreen and growing stalk. Adam telling her right away about the apple, since he didn't have much else in his brain but it and her, as really he had no other previous memories. Well, God must have not been very much all-knowing, for he didn't know that telling these children of his not to touch something meant that they surely would. It didn't help that a snake tempted them into doing so. A few minutes later, they not only touched the apple but ate it, and so they were cast out. But Eve, who still wanted everything, stole all the flowers we've ever known, spreading them unto the earth.
A good tale, Patrick. So here we are, to suffer, toil, and die, our designer all sad, mad, and disappointed in himself. In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains, next to a flowered pond, with a young Irishman named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. At least there is love.
Yeah, that's the great part.
How did I find you?
You're asking because you didn't find me. I found you.
I let myself be found.
Yes, you did. And you didn't come on with silly surface flirts like some do.
Those are like power plays, near insults even.
Yeah, you let your inner nature shine through naturally.
And you reflected yours. In 1969, in the Catskill Mountains next to a river, with a young Irishman named Patrick, with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty. And you reflected yours.
Any more comedy? Whatever happened to Adam and Eve?
Well, Eden's line and longevity was very strong, and such as even Methuselah, who lived for but a mere 969 years. He died on the 11th of Cheshvan of the year 1656, Anno Mundi, after creation, 7 days before the beginning of the Great Flood. According to Rashi in Gen 7:4, the Holy One delayed the flood especially because of the 7 days of mourning for the righteous Methuselah in his honor. Methuselah was son of Enoch and the grandfather of Noah. Methuselah had crossed a path without looking both ways and had been run over by a horse cart. The recent find of Osti 2:5 scroll tells us that Adam was yet alive on that day, he too boarding the Ark of Noah, being 55 years old at that time. In fact, I ran into Adam just the other day, looking innumerable years old at age 4095, but aging quite gracefully. Eve was at his side, yet gleaming with the ripeness obtained from Eden's apple. They revealed to me the formula for true apple cider, which would result in an elixir, not a vinegar. Eden's sinful apple, the cause of it, made for harsh apple cider, but when it was heated with sulfurous brimstone, it soon turned smooth. The hell boiled out of it. Adam was still going strong, but one day, he didn't look both ways when crossing the street and was run over by a truck. Eve found a new guy the very next day, a senior citizen.
Oh boy, I like the stories. Got more?
Yeah, sand trek.
Okay.
Moses was a basket case from the beginning, when the sweet little guy was set adrift in what must have been the high seas to him. Saved by his new step-parents-to-be, he was to become a merciless killer of many tribes. But his main claim to fame, as it turns out, was his getting lost in the desert for 40 years with 650,000 people. Being a man, he couldn't and didn't ask for directions, and God certainly wouldn't give him any. At times, some manna from heaven fell and bonked everyone on their heads. But these were still very tough times. I've walked on sand, and it is really tiring and wearing. Moses, giving rise to the term moseying, led the parade around in circles, often arriving at the rear of the long train, then lapping the whole thing, getting nowhere very fast. The manna ran out, but they ate the sand which was there. However, they still had to go 40 years without water that is not there in a desert. They were so thirsty they became somewhat refreshed by drinking mirages. No archaeological traces remain of the sand trek, but the Bible says they were there for 40 years. They were also immutable on a fixed and flat earth. Arriving in Canaan, they discovered that all was for naught, for their kind was already there. Moses then retired for the next 1,000 years, doing nothing much. I think he's still alive somewhere. So there we were, lying on the long rock slabs that were sightly tilted downward into some oblivion that we didn't want to go down and look at. Life was good and on it rolled, ever toward a future unknown. In 1969 in Poughkeepsie, with a young Irish man named Patrick with reddish-brown hair, and a beautiful young Colombian woman named Patty, and Patrick's boss named Mike, a thin young Italian man. Where to?
How about the Bahamas?
I'll book it for mid-December.
You're increasing your fitness for the Army.
Yeah, I'm already pretty fit, but the Army is going to put us through a heck of a lot in basic training through its 8 intense weeks. We went back to IBM. Christmas came and went. My time was probably near up. The war was still on. My father got sick with diverticulitis. It was a serious case, and he'd already lost a lot of weight. Programming was an art, and I was an artist. In my programs, I lived in a world of endless possibilities and contingencies. I left work a bit late, driving past the waterfalls that gave Wappingers Falls its name. As I sat down on the steps, my recent life flashed before me. So they finally got me, I said softly to myself. They finally got me. I had about a week to get back to Chicago. Mike held a farewell party for me and said he'd send the Army a recommendation. I brought the simulator card deck over to Mike's office and put it on his desk. He jumped up and shied away from it, as if it was full of contagion. We just need a place to keep it. It's been stable for a long time. Carl Dimsey down in the machine room knows assembler language, if it needs anything.
Okay.
He quickly stuffed it in a drawer.
This place is really going to be humming when you get back.
Patty told me to live it up while away, much as Lucille had. That I shouldn't necessarily wait for her. That she didn't know what she'd have to do. Didn't want to hold me back, etc. Well, she did want to, but she was acting brave.
My parents are great, but for the marriage thing, they brought me up well and nourished me into the one you could love and do. I feel a responsibility to them, although it really should be up to me to how I live my life now. I will decide, and only me.
I understand. And you must live too, for I could die over there.
And you had better live and love there.
In an army?
Well, yes, if you can.
We'll see.
Our relationship has been going so well, Patrick. Near 9 months. Where are all the problems, the flaws, the character defects?
True love perfects the whole show.
Come back alive.
I'll try. I put what little stuff I owned into my car and drove to Chicago. She watched me take off and stayed there, not moving. I felt like turning around, but didn't, heading off for all that lie beyond. The military, I said. I reported to the Army Induction Center in Forest Park, Illinois at 6 a.m. We just sat there for the next 11 hours because Fort Hood in Washington State had been snowed in. Good, too cold there. At 5 p.m. we got onto a bus to Midway Airport. Many of the inductees looked and were very young. We were going to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Good, it's warm there. We arrived and were taken into a reception area and stayed there about a week, having our pictures taken, getting uniforms and taking written tests. Well, I still knew things from college, and so I did well. They wanted to know if I wanted to extend my Army career to 3 years by taking up Vietnamese language study at first. I said no. Then they wanted to know if I wanted to extend my service to 4 years and move up quicker and such. I said no. One day we saw an elite infantry in advanced training running by. They grunting something like oomph every fourth step. They looked tough. The sort of kid hippie-looking guy in charge of us said to yell something back at them like, ha ha. Next, we took physical tests. Those who failed would get extra attention when we got into the 8 weeks of basic training. We had to swing hand to hand from 24 bars 3 times, making for 72, crawl 30 yards in under 20 seconds, throw a dummy grenade into a small circle from about 50 feet away, get through an obstacle course, and do a mile run under a certain time. Well, most of these seemed easy, but for the crawl. However, I'd noted that the best finishers moved their arms and legs all at the same time, not in a sequence, going really fast, so I copied that. For the grenade throw, I gauged its weight fairly well. It was like throwing a small brick. The mile run is never an easy thing, especially when wearing boots, but I did fine. I'd been on the track team and knew what to expect. I'd made 480 out of 500. Those scoring under 300 had failed and would have to retake it after a few weeks. He came in to see me. His whole demeanor suddenly changed. I was older than most and had tested well, so the drill sergeant Perry made me the squad leader, giving me a special room at the end of the barracks. Some still said yes, sir, even to that. The drill sergeant came on tough, going nose to nose with some of the recruits, telling them by yelling not to call him sir, but drill sergeant, as in, yes, drill sergeant. We were sent to the basic training barracks elsewhere in the sprawling fort.
Lights out at 9. Any questions? Here's a list of jobs, such as fire and guard duty, to be assigned every night, all through the night. For off-hours matters, I'll be going through you. I won't be dealing with them directly. I have to yell at them, so they learn to take orders without question.
No drill sergeant?
My brother is over in Vietnam. I'm worried. I haven't heard from him lately. Have any brothers?
2, one in college and one in high school.
Hope this damned war is over by then.
Me too.
Hey, S2, carry on.
We got up at 5:30 each day, then went to the mess hall for breakfast, and then stood in formation outside to hear about our day. At first, it was a lot of exercise, such as doing push-ups until our arms burned or jumping jacks until our legs burned. Those who tried to cheat by not going all the way down for push-ups had to do more right under the drill sergeant's nose, which gave the rest of us a slight recuperation time. Then we practiced marching in formation. Someone was always marching off in the wrong direction. They had to write left and right on their hands. We learned how to take our rifles apart, clean them, and put them back together even in the dark. We went off on long marches to the rifle ranges, having to march on the soft shoulder of the road. Some fell by the wayside, and if they were really in bad shape, got picked up by a truck that followed us. We had a few hours left over in the evenings. Usually I went to the library and played symphonies on the record player there, or had beer and pizza in the place we weren't supposed to go to. I'd noted that no one ever checked. 2 people had a big fight outside a brutal one. We camped out for days sometimes. They gave us little cigarette packs, each only containing 3 cigarettes. I traded mine for meal packets. One day, I had KP in the mess hall, as most of us did eventually. It was raining really hard out there. Lucky me, for I couldn't go on the long march that day. I didn't need any more rifle training anyway, for I could hit the target at 300 yards. Some kid in another company had turned his rifle on his drill sergeant on full automatic, cutting him in half. We then heard stories about some troops in Vietnam rolling grenades into their commanders' tents. This war was a sore spot for both Congress and for some of the troops. Halfway through basic training, while we were on bivouac, the captain came up to me and asked if I wanted to work in a nuclear facility. Yes, Captain. It sounded crazy. But it was then that I knew some wheels were turning somewhere in the Army's paper mill. One day they called us in and asked for our preferences on where we'd like to be stationed. The guy looked over my stats, just saying, "Your test scores are good." I filled out a destination form. 1st New York, 2nd Chicago, 3rd Hawaii.
Not much going on in New York or Chicago. We can't promise anything.
The training became tougher. Some troops were thrown out and would have to start their training from scratch. Some troops were conscientious objectors. We never knew where they were sent. We took more physical tests, double tough, but doable for me. I scored 490, having improved my grenade throw. We learned how to kill in every conceivable way, from bayonets to hand-to-hand combat to planting mines and more. We even crawled through an obstacle course studded with barbed wire, with live fire tracing over our heads. I called up my father. He was still very sick, and here I was, stuck in the middle of bayous and swamps, becoming a finely tuned instrument of war. My gambits to outwait the war had failed. After another 8 weeks of advanced training in whatever field which was yet to be determined, I'd be off to war, most likely. Our basic training now became triple tough, but I'd reached into reserves that I never knew I had. Now we had to do a 2-mile run, with a pack on. I felt powerful, but what would that do against a bullet? We received our advanced training destinations. Mine was to be at Fort Sill, Oklahoma in artillery. Must have had to do with my math skills. 2 weeks to go, they finally gave us a weekend off. I took a bus 50 miles to St. Charles just to be somewhere normal. Some of the other troops did too, and a few deserted, probably heading for Canada. I called Patty and told her that I might be launching artillery shells or nuclear missiles.
Stop joking.
I'm not. Basic training finally ended. It's seeming to have gone on forever. I packed my large duffel bag and went out to wait for the bus to Fort Sill. It came. I was about to get on it when the captain came running out saying,
Don't get on, you're getting new orders.
"When and where, Captain?"
I don't know, it will probably take a few weeks. This doesn't happen very often.
I lounged around in my squad room bunk for a week, doing nothing and not much. Although reading and writing, and then a new batch of trainees came in. Sergeant Perry made me a temporary assistant drill sergeant. He even gave me one of those drill sergeant hats. I still have it, to this day. It was easy, for now I could walk on the road surface instead of on the sandy shoulder. Once in a while I would remind the troops to stay in step. It was rather a walk in the park for me now. Several weeks passed. I got my new orders, but they were hard to figure since they said Oakland, California.
Am I to be stationed in Oakland, Captain? I guess so, Fort Ord.
Isn't that a transfer station, Captain?
Well, yes, but I guess they need you to work there. My captain seemed to be at a loss for an explanation. Perhaps no one had ever bypassed advanced training to go directly overseas. I also had a week's leave given to me to get ready. I flew back to Chicago via Houston, the only way to get there from my nowhere land. I called up Joe Gaynor, who had worked at the post office. We went and checked the APO mailing address on my orders. It was for Honolulu. Well, that was good to know in case I'd been thinking of driving my car to Oakland. My father was improving, according to my mother. I went to the hospital to see him. He wasn't so optimistic. Well, he was wrong, for he would live to be 91, but little did we know of that then. Old Oak Park brought back memories, but I had now outgrown the place, it seemed. I slept out on the front porch for a week, causing me to think of old times, and then flew to Oakland on the Army's dime, took a bus, and then got off at Fort Ord. They fitted me for a khaki uniform with both longs and shorts. The place was run like basic training. We had formations every morning. Some had their names called to leave, and the rest were given silly jobs like guarding dumpsters or whatever, these to be done in the middle of the night. After a few days, they called my name along with a few others. We got into a truck and were driven to an Air Force base where we boarded a cargo jet, which also carried a large tank. It was so noisy that we couldn't even hear each other.
After 4 or 5 hours, the big island of Hawaii appeared out the window. We flew on, passing Molokai and Maui, and then landed on Oahu at Hickam Air Force Base. A short shuttle ride then took us to the adjacent Honolulu International Airport, which was open to the air, where all but me were told to get into a bus that would take them somewhere, they telling me to just walk out of the front door and make my way by myself to Fort Shafter. Walking excitedly, I passed the gateways to such exotic ports as Papeete, Tahiti, Guam, Saipan, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Bali, and Japan. Hare Krishnas played tambourines for me outside, so here I was near Waikiki, all alone with my heavy duffel bag. The air was full of scents, and the Pali Mountains and their cliffsides loomed in the distance. What kind of an army unit was I in? It seemed too good to be true, and yet there I was. The fates had sent me to paradise. I was struck for the minute by the lush green and fertile majesty of the mountains, whose tops were shrouded in mist, for this new reality was almost too much to comprehend at first glance. My brain just wasn't used to it, and so I didn't really know how to look at it. I said nothing, but stood still looking, as the perfumes of my flowered necklace and the balm of the ocean breezes told me that I had reached the place whose pictures from the National Geographic I had plastered all over the walls of my room in Illinois a long time ago. I hailed a taxi, and about 6 miles later we arrived at Fort Shafter, the home of the Computer System Command Pacific, or CSC PAC. The MP at the gate looking over my orders, telling the driver something, and then waving us through. He dropped me at Sergeant Schaefer's office. Old Sergeant Schaefer looked weary, but I guessed it was from his age. He was a lifer. I sat down and he talked to me about a lot of things, none of them military, finally saying and instructing,
Take 2 weeks off, free of charge, and then come back to see me. You're going to be working in that compound across Palm Circle, we then going outside and he pointing to it. They're mostly civilians and civil service. You won't be working for me. I'm just here to give you your paycheck, to set up visits to the doctor or the dentist, handle leave time, which is a month a year and such. Go there and say hello. and remind them that I gave you 2 weeks off.
What do they do over there, Sergeant?
Heck if I really know.
But you've heard rumors, Sergeant.
Yeah, I've been here a long time. Look at my hash marks. I'll tell you in the Jeep. Come on, I'll give you a ride over to the barracks. Here's your new insignia. You're now a Specialist 4, Spec 4 for short.
Thanks, Sergeant. I'd never heard of a Specialist 4 rank, but I didn't mention it. We drove about a quarter of a mile, the sergeant calling attention to places like the movie theater, the library, and some statues. We had to stop to let someone pass.
There goes Paul, the sergeant noted, carrying some worthless piece of paper.
He's useless?
Yeah, practically. Some screw-up sent him here. We're gonna have him run our Xerox machine.
Good that he didn't get sent to a nuclear facility. Any of those around here?
Nope. Ha, they told you that?
Yes, but way back in the middle of basic.
The more things change, the more they stay the same in this man's army.
So, what do those civilians and civil service workers do where I'm gonna work at?
Mysterious things having to do with intelligence, logistics, spying, and probably some off-the-wall hush-hush operations. I'm guessing. They don't inform me as to the details.
But they still have to report to the Army.
Higher up, I suppose. Hey, here's the barracks and there's the PX across the street. Be careful in the barracks. Lot of rowdies there. I don't deal with the barracks. Sometimes a captain might come around to do a surprise inspection which he will advertise beforehand. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes and no, thanks, Sergeant. So then, the sergeant, my workplace, and the barracks seemed to be completely separate operations. I went in and took a look at the barracks. There was music blasting, people seeming to be on drugs, and even one fight going on. I need not officially check into this place, I thought. I'll go stay in Waikiki, especially during my 2 free weeks, and then probably stay there longer. I found an empty bunk in the barracks that had been thrown up against a wall, dragged it to a far corner, and cobbled together some empty lockers as a kind of a wall, then went down to the quartermaster's and obtained sheets, a blanket, and a pillow. I made the bed perfectly, which would be its first and last time, for I wasn't ever going to sleep in it.